Mayor Lori Lightfoot and the Chicago Police Department are out with a new interim CPD foot chase policy. Among other things, it bans officers from pursuing suspects on foot if they're suspected of a crime lower than a Class A misdemeanor. It also details tactics to avoid a foot pursuit, such as, quote, continual communication with the subject. Officers must also activate body cameras to record pursuits in full, and it prohibits foot pursuits stemming from minor traffic offenses. And joining us now with their take on this newly announced policy are Robert Bohn from the Chicago Police Department. He's the Executive Director of the Office of Constitutional Policing and Reform. Arewa Karen Winters, a co-chair of the community working group that was assembled last summer to provide community input on police reform. Retired police officer Richard Wooten, founder of the nonprofit Gathering Point Community Council. And Nusrat Chowdhury, legal director at the ACLU of Illinois. Welcome all of you back to Chicago tonight. Robert Bohn, the first question I have when looking at this list of rules is it's a lot of things for officers to keep in mind. It's like a checklist they have to go through in a situation that could be heat of the moment. So how is an officer able to go through all these things when deciding whether or not to engage?
Well, the one thing this policy prioritizes is not only officer safety, but safety for the community as well. It really creates several bright lines for officers where they have to weigh the risk of engaging in the pursuit with the need to apprehend the offender. It enhances supervisor responsibilities such that officers really are taking direction on a continuous basis. And that, again, that's all designed around enhancing safety.
And Nusrat Chowdhury, this comes in the wake of the Toledo and the Anthony Alvarez shootings that came after foot pursuits. Do you think that these new rules help prevent future situations like Alvarez and Toledo?
These rules, unfortunately, don't go far enough. We know that Chicago has a problem with deadly foot pursuits, borne out by the killings that you just mentioned, but also years of data and the monitor's recent findings. What we need a policy to do is to be clear and easy to understand for officers to really grasp and implement in real time under immense pressure. And unfortunately, this policy is very long. It includes vague language, and it doesn't put up clear enough guardrails, especially with respect to prohibiting foot pursuits for minor offenses. You referred earlier to Class A misdemeanors, but there are lots of exceptions for Class B and C misdemeanors here in this policy. And it's worth underscoring that something as low as gambling, possession of alcohol by a minor, possession of drug paraphernalia, those are the kinds of offenses for which a foot pursuit would still be permitted under this policy.
All right, I want to get back to those things in a bit, but yesterday Superintendent David Brown emphasized that he felt it was important to listen to the community, and here's a little bit of what he said.
We likely will hear something that we didn't think of, and we want the benefit of hearing that from the community that we need to include in this policy. So it's worthwhile. You know, you'll never hear me say engaging in the community is a bad thing, even if you think you know everything. The community needs to be engaged with every opportunity to help us build trust.
Arewa Karen Winters, do you think this policy was a result of community input?
Absolutely. And I want to say this probably started, prior to even the coalition coming forward with the consent decree, because historically this has been happening over and over and over and over, time and time again in Black and brown communities. So I definitely think it was from the people, the pressure from the people to not only have the consent decree, but to have police reform, because it is very necessary. It's very needed in this city. And this policy doesn't cut it.
So you're saying it wasn't enough input from the community, as the superintendent says he wanted to listen to the community on this. And Richard Wooten, as a former cop, I'll present this question to you. How do you go through in your head, well, is it a Class A misdemeanor or above? Is this person going to be a threat to the community? Go through this checklist in a situation that can be very heated.
Exactly. This is putting more stress on the officers, and it's also causing them to make more mistakes, because when they got to determine, when is a good time to chase and when it's not a good time to chase, it's going to put their lives even further in danger. And I think the policy should be more specific, more clear, and actually address exactly what they can chase for and when they can chase. Because, when I was going through the policy myself, it is just so... it's wishy-washy, and it also leaves out a whole lot of, it leaves room for much error.
All right. Well, Robert Bork, there are a lot of responses here I need you to respond to. So you've heard the criticism, not enough community input, it doesn't go far enough, it's too vague in its language, and that it could be dangerous for the police having to consider all these things. Your response to some of those issues?
Yeah, so I want to start with community engagement, because it's just not true to say that this policy wasn't developed with any community engagement. In fact, Ms. Winter's group met with us several weeks ago, and we talked extensively about what should be included in a foot pursuit policy. But what I would also say is that the ACLU and others really are seeking special treatment with respect to engagement. And what we've put forward is a very comprehensive plan, the most comprehensive plan that the department has ever engaged in, to get feedback not only from the community, but also from our officers, including a webinar on June 1st, 2 community meetings, one in June, one in July. The policy is open now for public comment, so we really invite public comment from everyone across the city of Chicago. And what we're really hoping to do is to have really broad community engagement and to hear from every community across the city. With respect to the policy itself, again, it prioritizes officer safety. It does create a bright line, and it creates clear responsibilities for supervisors.
And Nusrat Chowdhury, the police department mentions that this is interim. They're still studying this. They wanted to get something out really quickly in the wake of Alvarez and Toledo. What are the things that you believe should be in a permanent, more complete foot pursuit policy?
I think to underscore that, Arewa and others could have been given the chance to give input on this policy, even as developing an interim policy. So making that point clear, this is not about the ACLU, it's about people from directly impacted communities. And in terms of what the policy should actually include, this policy does not include early and a clear statement that foot pursuits are extraordinarily dangerous. We know this city has a problem with deadly foot pursuits, and that is not made clear in the purpose of the policy or throughout it. But what we get instead are, as others have mentioned, wishy-washy statements that leave a lot of room for officer discretion to engage in a foot pursuit, even when there are minor offenses, even in the categories of offenses that are identified in the foot pursuit. And that is not the kind of clear, easy to operationalize guidance that's going to restrict what has been a deadly practice in the city of Chicago for a very long time.
And Aurelio Karen Winters, community groups did suggest dozens of recommendations. Many of them did not make it in here. What do you believe should make it into this policy that was left out?
I just want to say I appreciate Deputy Superintendent Boyd, but no, I can't say honestly that we had an extensive conversation. Initially, they did introduce some of their concepts to us, but we didn't have we didn't receive anything written, so we really didn't have a chance to process and go through to even, wholeheartedly make recommendations. But in 2019, the coalition did submit some things, but what I'm more concerned about is the prohibitions. It's like I didn't see any prohibitions listed. And one of them, for me, is so many of our young people are shot in their backs while they're running away, while they're fleeing. They say that they're a threat to the community, but really at that instant, they're only a threat to themselves. So how can police officers engage the threat without killing them, without, harming them? And so that's when I think of serve and protect. It's like, even in the worst case scenarios, whether they have a weapon, not have a weapon, if they're not openly shooting at anyone, which in most cases they're not, they're running away. Most of them are climbing fences and they lose their lives. So I want to see our police department engage with especially our young people in our communities, where everyone can come out safe.
Richard Wooten,
so that is one of the things I want to see, the prohibitions.
I see. Richard Wooten, how do police officers feel about foot pursuits in general? I mean, do they feel that they carry a whole lot of risk and danger with them? Would they rather not engage in a foot pursuit, or would they rather be able to engage that way?
Well, let me say this here. Foot pursuits is part of the job, and we understand that. In August 19, 2001, we lost a great officer that worked with me in the Inglewood District, Eric Lee, from a foot pursuit, who was actually shot by an offender. But we need to understand that foot pursuits sometimes it's not necessary. When you have gambling, in the Black and brown communities, these are most of your foot pursuits come from: gambling, suspended driver's license, drinking on a public way, or some other minor incident where the individual is going to return back around in that area again, the next day. So why pursue them when they're already going to be there? But what happens when an officer actually see these particular crimes in, in this act, they begin to actually, their adrenaline level kicks in, and then they go running. What we need is a statement within a policy that says we will not chase anyone unless it's life-threatening and is a class A, well, not class A, but a felony. Other than that, it should not be any foot pursuits because you put the officer at danger, you put the community at danger, and you also put this individual that's running at danger because they don't want to be called by the police.
All right, and as the policy mentions, there is more to come on this. They're going to have a community review process and then come out with more specific proposals in September. And we'll have to leave it here for now. Our thanks to Arroyo Karen Winters, Nusrat Chowdhury, Richard Wooten, and Robert Boyd. Thanks all for joining us.
Thank you.